like to go ahead and welcome Elizabeth to share her expertise on Labyrinth with us.
Thank you, Gloria. So good to be here with the Evans Center and all the people joining us today. I see the participants are being added as we get started here, so welcome. I want to start with helping you get here. So I'd like for you to just take a few moments to take a deep breath and breathe out and open yourself to what is here, to what is here and now, because resilience really is about being present to what is actual, and being able to respond to what is and what is actual. So I want to share a story that a popular Buddhist teacher, Tara Brach, tells when she does her Sangha talks. So it's about being mindful. So if you can get up in the morning, excited about the possibilities of the day, grateful for the people in your life, the food you have. If you can go about your day and work hard, play hard, and take the time your body needs to rest and replenish without taking a pill or a drink of alcohol, then you are probably a dog. So being human is hard, isn't it? We, unlike our four-legged friends, we have these brains that imagine possibilities and think about the future and remember the past. And sometimes it's just so hard to get really here in the present. So our dogs can teach us how to be present in the moment to what is. It's especially hard right now as we navigate these pandemics that we're find ourselves in, the dual pandemics of systematic equality, and that how the COVID-19 pandemic impacts people who are in these desperate places. So there is systematic inequality, and we're seeing that every day in our hospital. We're seeing that in our coworkers. We're seeing the struggle in our families. Some of our families may not believe that this is real, but those of us who work here know that it's very real. And so it's just very hard to be present to all of this. It really requires that we be mindful that we are both from the earth, or humus, we are from the stars, the divine, and yet we are challenged not to over-identify with being from the divine or from the earth. So over-identification with our egoic states, I am better than, more than, richer than, luckier than, more well off, better off. If we identify with that, then there is another who is less than, who is below me, beneath me, other than me, not as good, really worse off, smaller than. And so, so some people really do identify with that better than place. And some people really do identify with the, I am lower than the worms, lower than the dirt, lower than the dust. Either one of these identifications can rob us of being resilient, being our true self, remembering that we are essence. When we are in the pure state of now, we are really at home with ourselves. And being at home with ourselves, even in these troubled times, is essential to navigating these pandemics, navigating the stress of life, and really being able to tap into our own resilience. So today we're going to look at using the labyrinth. as a tool to help us develop this resilience and let go of our over-identification. I think it's paradoxical that the way to our divine sense of self is through our humble sense of self, our humility, our humus, or the earth. To be grounded, to have feet fully and firmly on the ground, rooted in what is, and reaching for the heights of our possibilities and being open to whatever is there for us. We can tap into this resilience. So resilience and practicing resilience. And practicing in such a way that we can tap into this essence is really what a lot of our religions are about. So Buddhism calls this our true home, being at home with ourselves, our true home. In Christianity, it's the kingdom of God, or having a servant mentality. Humility comes from letting go of our egoic state. So the very word Islam means subservient. So submitting to the ultimate authority of God. It's not being less than or more than, but recognizing that we are all one. We are not separate. And it's this essence that connects us to one another. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. I hope you can see the slideshow presentation. I want to take a look at the labyrinth, a little bit of the history of the labyrinth and its traditional uses. Explore the benefits of using the labyrinth, and I'm looking over at my screen over here, and explore places on the labyrinth, so we'll have an experience of the labyrinth, and journey together, and have some time at the end to share insights and questions. So a little bit of the history. This is a picture of the labyrinth at Riley Hospital for Children, people walking on it. They don't have their masks on, so it was not a recent photograph. You can find it in the brochure about the labyrinth that you might be familiar with. It's been circulating around. A little bit about the Minotaur and the use of the labyrinth of Crete. So this was thought to be the first labyrinth. Back in this time, labyrinths were the same as maze. So it was built to trap the monster, the Minotaur. The Minotaur was half human, half divine. So if you think about our human and divine natures, in this monster, they were at war within the monster, and the monster was at war with humanity, and it sought to devour humanity. And so they trapped it in this maze and then fed the monster human beings to eat, to keep the monster from attacking the rest of humanity. So they made sacrifices to the monster, and it was heartbreaking to the king, and Minos, so he built this, and his son, sadly, wanted to go and try to conquer the monster for good. So the son, there's two people pictured here, two women. They both loved the son. He's the hero of our story. And they gave him a thread to take with him into the maze so that he could find his way out. So he went in, conquered the monster, and followed this thread that they had given him, a thread made of love, actually, so that he could get out of the maze, out of the bind. So I'm suggesting that we too can use the labyrinth to go in. We can't get lost in today's labyrinth. There's one path in and one path out, so there's no getting lost. Although on this journey, we might feel lost at times. It's very difficult to hold the human and divine together. And so on the Labyrinth, we have this opportunity to face our monsters, also to tap into that hero within, our resilience. So I think this beginning story is a story of resilience. Also, let's see, having technical difficulty here. There it is. Yep. So the Labyrinth in its current state with one way in, one way out is really built upon the golden spiral, or the golden ratio. Sacred geometry is built into the architecture. So in my history, I was the chaplain hired to open the North Hospital, and we opened the North Hospital with architecture and art based on sacred geometry. So one of those shapes is the golden spiral, or the golden ratio. The spiral has been used by artists like Da Vinci and his famous painting, and it's the pyramids of Egypt. It's really, it ascribes a sacred meaning to geometric shapes. So the spiraling down. So the hero in many of the Greek myths had to go down to the underworld to face something and come out a changed person. So these are stories of transformation. So using the Labyrinth and tapping into resilience is to tap into your own transformational journey, to pay attention to it. The labyrinth at Chartres, that is one of the most famous labyrinths. It was built around 1220. And during this time, people were not able to go to Jerusalem because of the wars. And so this is thought to have served as a substitute for going to Jerusalem and making a pilgrimage. And so it was used that way some. It was also in ruins for quite a while until it was revived again. And then Lauren Artris visited this labyrinth and brought it back to the United States as an idea to help her congregation walk a spiritual path. And so a few years later, she founded Veriditas. It was a project dedicated to introducing people to labyrinths. And labyrinths became very popular in the 90s and early 2000s. And you'll be able to see, and I think it was included in some of the handouts, a list of labyrinths here in the Indianapolis area. So you could go and walk them if you're able and enjoy that groundedness, that sense of feet on the earth, and the feeling of exploring the inner world in the outer world as well. So feeling that connection of earth and sky as you walk the labyrinth. So looking at resilience a little closer, it is really the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So we all have stressors in our lives. And it's not about the amount of stress we have, it's how we manage it or how we recover from it. Or, you know, we just have to accept in some way that life is stressful, life is hard. If without the stress, we wouldn't grow. But if it becomes too much and we can't really manage it, then we get sick and sicker and sicker, and more unable to bounce back. So resiliency can be about caring for ourselves, caring for our health. It's about what we eat, what we put in our body. It's the amount of rest we can get. It's about being flexible being open. Supple is one of my favorite words. Plasticity in our biology, elasticity, springiness. Sometimes I don't always feel that. So I guess the big question, and maybe you can share a little bit in the chat, or what helps you bounce back from the stressors in your life? I think another important reason to develop resilience helps you deal with your emotions, helps us deal with feelings of anger, resentment, grief, guilt. I would add shame. I know as many people get in touch with white privilege, it stirs up feelings of shame. So for those of us with white skin, sometimes it's very difficult to hold the pain of grief, of shame, of not recognizing privilege. And as we really see the damage that can do to our brown and black brothers and sisters, people of color, it's sometimes very difficult to hold. But being able to hold those feelings gently and own what is mine, and then take action to remedy the rest, requires resilience. When we can tap into resiliency, we have the courage to reach out for help. So we can claim our humility, that I can't really do everything myself all the time. It helps me to find enjoyment in life. Even when life is stressful, there are moments that I can experience joy. And someone said, it's those moments of joy, and allowing ourselves moments of joy, even in this pandemic, even in the midst of suffering. When joy comes, that in and of itself is a protest. Joy. There can be joy in the midst of this. And resilience boosts our immune system and helps protect us against illnesses like depression and anxiety. So some of us have been bullied in our lives, and then when we treat people who have been bullied or harmed in some horrible way, it can be re-traumatizing to us. Secondary trauma is pretty common here in the healthcare setting. And so when we're resilient, we can tap into what is ours and what is theirs, and leave what is not ours outside of ourselves, not take it in so fully and claim it as our own or identify with it. So what is theirs, what is mine. And then, of course, to cope with stress. And it helps us to be able to confront others, to stand up for ourselves in ways that are grounded in mediation, and conflict management, and managing difficult dynamics. So I'll just put all these up here. Self-care is so important, to do things for ourselves, not to think of that as selfish or being self-centered, but to know that self-care really helps us to be the caregivers other people need. And that's a pretty common message now, as the airlines have so adeptly taught us to put our oxygen mask on first, and then we can care for others. So walking meditation, I just want to, we won't be walking today, but if you can, when you leave the hospital or wherever you are, some people are working from home who joined us today, but whenever you can be outside, take a few moments to feel your feet on the ground, to feel the air on your face, to feel the sun, or wherever, even if you're in the rain, maybe to feel the rain, to become aware of those feelings and breathe that in, and that will help you be present to that walk. So instead of the rush to the car, it can be a luxury to experience this moment of being outside. Really being outside, it helps to build resilience. It's very healing. Walking the labyrinth, facing those monsters can be very healing. Facing that split between less than, better than, can be very healing to integrate I am, not just better than, less than, or different from. And then we can use the labyrinth to seek answers to spiritual questions. We can use it to discern and make decisions. Do you have a big decision you're facing? What will I do with the rest of my life? What do I need to do next? Do I need to make a change in my job? How do I respond to my family who believes the pandemic is a farce? How do I respond to conflict in myself and my family? You can ask big questions before you walk the labyrinth, and open your mind to whatever flows into your mind, the thoughts that are there, the experience of letting all of that go and just walking. And because the labyrinth is movement, it's constant moving forward. And moving forward, we get back to where we were, but in a different, having had a different experience. So the labyrinth is fascinating for that. It's a constant movement forward. And just the physical movement will help get us unstuck. If it's thoughts, if it's emotions, physical movement can help us get unstuck. So people who run talk about this a lot. It helps me work out the cobwebs of my brain, my frontal cortex, when I get obsessed on some thoughts or ruminating about the past or trying to work on problems and feel stuck, to just turn that off and be present in the moment on a run or on a walk. Or if you're in a wheelchair, to be forward moving is so important, to roll with things. So I love this quote by Rilke from Letters to a Young Poet. Be patient toward all that is unresolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not seek the answers which cannot be given you, because you would not be able to live them. I think in chaplaincy, in listening to people, it's so tempting to try to answer their questions. People ask, why is this happening to me? Why can I not ever get ahead? Why is this happening? Or is God punishing me? Why do I have to be sick now? It's so tempting to try to say, well, and then come up with some answer, but to not try to answer it, but to sit with that question, to say in a very reflective manner and respectful manner, yes, that is your question. How can you live that question right now? Because it's the question that starts the journey. And that's true of walking the labyrinth. So at this, I'd like for you to take your labyrinth. If you have the paper labyrinth here with you, that would be wonderful. Some people have labyrinths like a pencil type labyrinth where you can follow in a groove. When you have that groove, you can close your eyes. So in this moment, though, we'll just kind of meditate on, I think gratitude is one way to really become present to what is, especially in times of stress. To have that moment of gratitude in the midst of the struggle can be really life-giving. So I want to ask the question, what brings you joy? What persons, places, experiences provide that space for you to relax and just be? And think for a few moments about one or two answers to that question. What are you grateful for? What brings you joy? Take a few breaths in, and we're going to then begin to walk this labyrinth. And as we do, just know that this is about the journey, not necessarily about the destination. The goal is not really to get to the center. The goal is to experience the twists and turns of the labyrinth, because it does mirror our lives. Stepping onto the path or starting the journey, open your mind to any images that might come up naturally, the people you are grateful for, the places where you go or live, family and friends, solitude. And as we journey together, we start to feel the rhythm. And don't worry if you get off the path, especially on this finger labyrinth. It's really easy to do. But just let yourself experience the back and forth of the labyrinth. It sometimes feels like the more you go, the farther you get from the center. But that's okay. It's not about the destination. Feel the rhythm of it. There is a rhythm to life. Let your mind drift away. Just focus on your finger, on the twists and turns. And when you get to the center, take a deep breath in. Hear these words from Mary Oliver. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. This is a short poem by Anais Nin. It's called Risk. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Just continue to take some deep breaths. Breathe in. Pay attention to what you're hearing. Anything that might be standing out to you right now. Any words, maybe in the poems. Any thoughts. When we meditate on gratitude, sometimes we get in touch with other emotions, not just joy. So whatever you find there at the center, receive whatever it is. Know that these emotions, this joy, this pain, the experience of what is something that is here for you, and it waits for you at the center whenever you need it. You might just hold your arms out and receive the wisdom that can come from walking this journey, and take it into yourself. Bring your hands into yourself, to your heart, and breathe. And Ree Nowen talked about being a child of God is not being childish or childlike, but being open to the present moment, the curiosity of what is there for you, the interest and intrigue, and rather than closing off in a firm, hard definition of what is, saying, I'm curious about what that is. I'm curious about that emotion. Wonder why I'm having this thought right now. Paying attention, hearing, knowing, seeing what is there for you. Take a few more breaths. Maybe what is there for you, you would experience in this emotion. Just letting it go, being free. So as we begin to leave this place, this centering, this experience, and maybe you already have, we don't have to be at the same place on this journey. Just taking with you, remembering this experience, or let your mind just drift as you follow your finger along the labyrinth. Sometimes when people have a profound insight, they just go right out of the labyrinth, so they don't unwind it. They don't leave the center and retrace their steps, because you've gotten what you needed. But others of us need a few more minutes to just let go and breathe. Just remember the journey is the destination. Life is a journey, not a destination. We think Ralph Waldo Emerson said that. I think when stressors really come and are overwhelming, the first thing you can do is remember to breathe. Breathe. The breath in is as important as the breath out. Without the breath in, you cannot have a breath out. Breathing in, breathing out. Opposites, but both needed for the act of breathing. This is where two opposite actions become one. And as you're ready to come out of that moment of meditation, I'm curious if anything has come up for you, if you'd like to share what you've experienced, if you have questions. So what will you be taking with you from the experience of the labyrinth?
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat, and I'll be happy to share those with Elizabeth, and she can give us her answers to those questions.
I'm curious if you were able to do the labyrinth. Did you have the experience?
Doesn't look like we're having any questions coming through. Someone shared that they enjoy alone time because they're an introvert. Let's see what else we have. Someone said yes, they did.
Oh, good.
They've had the privilege of walking a couple different ones, and someone said that they were able to use the labyrinth and draw with their finger. And someone said that they did the meditation experience while on a walk.
Nice.
Does anyone have any specific questions they'd like to ask Elizabeth while we have her on here? Someone shared it was surprising how calming just the finger labyrinth can be.
Yes. Well, I'll show you a labyrinth I have in my office here. I use it quite a bit. It's a two-sided labyrinth. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's got grooves in it, so two people can do it together, sitting side by side or across from each other. When you can do this with two hands, it's very calming to the brain. It kind of brings a sense of symmetry or calmness to the brain.
Let's see, we have a few more comments. Let's see. I had the labyrinth experience, but I ran rather than walking slowly to the center of the labyrinth. Yeah. Says they have mobility issues right now and didn't want to go slowly, and it felt good to run to a place of rest.
Yes.
Okay, and then it said, have you done this work during or as part of yoga?
Yes, in fact, it's awesome to do yoga, and then you can do certain poses at the center. And I, so This book, Exploring the Labyrinth, A Guide for Healing and Spiritual Growth, she suggests doing yoga on the labyrinth and really blessing the space, smudging the space, and then it becomes some, it's really sacred space. But yoga, yes. Dancing on the labyrinth, that is a wonderful experience. So I've thought about it when you're talking about running, and with mobility issues, to just get in there and then have that moment of rest. I've used it quite a bit. It was used in the Anasazi and other First Nation cultures as a map to the next world, and you can find them in burial sites and caves, thinking that it provides a map to the next world. And so it really is transitional space. So I've used it with our resident groups, saying goodbye to the outgoing residents and hello to the incoming residents. I've used it with church groups during Lent. So really letting go of whatever gets in the way of spiritual awakening, to kind of clear the barriers and the blocks. And, I think of yoga that way. It's such a stretching, letting go experience.
Let's see, we have a few more comments. It says, when I arrived at the center of the labyrinth, I found myself lying down on the massage table and smelling lavender.
That's lovely.
Yes. And then someone's asking if the PowerPoint will be available to us to reflect again later.
Oh, yes.
Okay, we can talk about that. And then someone says one of their retirement goals is to build their own labyrinth in their yard.
The book, Exploring the Labyrinth, has a chapter on how to do that. I'm sure that you can find different things, but there's different number of circuits, so that can be very simple, like a spiral, but it also can be kind of complicated too. And with 7 or 9 or more circuits.
And another question is, how can you quiet your mind to do the labyrinth?
Yes. I think of the Buddhist meditation of monkey mind, allowing the thoughts to just flow through. So it's hard to stop the thoughts, but not to grab onto them to start working on them. And anytime you grab onto a thought, you can take a deep breath in and let that go, and then continue on. But that image of monkey mind has stayed with me over the years. Of these thoughts will just keep coming. I'm kind of a head person, and logical, rational is important to me, and I'll work on things. So it's a great relief to just let those go. And I say just, it's harder than it sounds. But I think really feeling feet on the ground, feeling and experiencing what is, your bum in the seat if you're sitting, feel the support that you have, really helps you let go of those thoughts, to get more interested in what you're sensing rather than what you're thinking. Does that help?
Yes. I don't have any more questions. Does anyone else have more questions that they would like to ask our speaker?
Good, I'm glad.
Okay. Let's see. Doesn't look like we have any more questions coming through.
Do you know about the labyrinths that we have here at IU Health? The one at Methodist Hospital and also Riley Hospital for Children. I'm seeing the chat, Lindsay, from Lindsay. Wonderful. It seems like we all need a nudge or two. Oh yeah, and the one at IU North. Thank you, Anne. Yeah, that's great. Well, it has been a pleasure to be with you here today and experience the labyrinth with you. And I wish you well on your journey, that you experience healing and that sense of oneness with all that is, and blessings.
So I'd like to thank everyone for attending the webinar, and I hope you all have a better understanding of the labyrinth and their use. If you have any further questions for Elizabeth, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer them. And you can send an email to her email address, eprice1, is that correct? At iuhealth.org. And then my email, I'm Gloria Robertson with the Evans Center. It's grobert2 at iuhealth.org. And that should conclude our presentation for today. So thank you everyone for attending.